La challenging Nankinde Ari Longchen Kang Genzin Kalun Tresser Kungu Tritong Tenzin Namje Chore Kong Joji de Kasab Chokchong Ka Ganzi Panchen Rinpoche Jarmur Kurla Karma Chirang Sonshin Nanjin Ane Kungu Lorji Ta Lewa Jiware Sharayana Chasongji Shetu Kumindu Kungula Jasal Hasala Chongsha Ane Masurula Sopa Lopta Jerem Lopta Tsawi Jila Katong ik sangdang shirkli kongla shakli nangsha di jila ni zhuni sokpa tsigiya tong shibsha titab sartan chiya la sokpa shakli halio jachimu nangsha di jila chiktang gabjara danchi tongsim lo ni chiktang gabjara jachi chatik lo par ari New York na danchi shiwi tali lama kasab tongchu kong shakli kojok nangsha di jis tongchu li tsab tong rinbi ni kasab tongchu shakli nangsha Kasab Tonju Shakli Nang Jimbi Kaps Pochi Tepsa Kandong Potala Patan Kang New York Pokang Aratang Canada Kulchi Potun Japchur Tsokpa Dang Purg Tansok Ka Sanzik Nangsha Chikdang Gabjara Dancha Tongulu Ari Jonglan Remurchi Konsacha Ari Chibjir Na Tiang Shakli Nangsha Chikdang Gabjara Chabdan Ni Gupcha Tamba par Ari Jasa Washington the Consacha Muxer Kasupchi Gankriji Sha Jerchi Poton Linger Teacups, Jerchi Poton Linger Consanzik Noaton Ari Johnson Lantern Kanda, Isha Lantern Consanzik Noati Shalinosa, Chiton Gubjara Jach Tambalo Put Katsup Sobat Tiniba Cups Soksun Genji Sha Chiton Gubjara Gupcha Tambalo Muxer Sondi Cups, Kalun Damtun Shonchi, Cup Simron, Kalun Liker Nasha. Chikdang Gubjara Gupchu Kosumno ni Gupchu Kornga par Losimno Sanshur Pojong Kalun Tui Nzengen Jisha Di Jis RPFG ni Stanford University Lumnir Kanda Puchi Jarabton Chaps Sanrik Nangshin Sopag Loptana Dinag Shali Nasha Tarti Caps Ari Johnson Mountain Kong Asia Mountain Kong Porkidis and Genzing Shali Nandesha That's what touch now, Sashangu.
Tujana, Tatari de Benjamin Compoton, Rosum Chimbe. Mixed to drink Sondu Tazagonamata, Chapchi, the Sondu Kudinanga, challenging at some Tuji Shuada, any 30 days, Sungshenang at the Gondre, Tanga to think Jagan so, Ajerum Jitsube, Sungshenang at Sama, the member Pershunda, Upemitic Sugi, Toilet, Tunga Shingeta, and Tunga Shet Super number, and Haba to 30 days. 총두디 더 투나난제 대 평에 정말 섬디 뜻이들 쉬야이 안타리 대에 쉬야디 주나 인지날 라브로치 수도 다디 양표게 맞상에 다딘데 톨 지김부터 안디 톨 줌젠직 다 벤지rum시 응원수다 제 고급랑에 미지임바 차네 디 내도 두두치로 지 수도 벤지rum신기 꾸질로 주고 다가 믹스에 캐바다 딘데 심주칭에 가 말에 이내 드링에 쉬야도 디날 드리체부터 다 망치에 드리다다 아저rum진 쯧베 숭신능에 상매다 닝도인디는 아주 상매 캔세리 아니게 인지나를 간다 죽돔 다 닝도르데 다데 벽에나 쉬비나 벤지rum신 충분히 제는 공부 맞아봐도 그 메제날 혼예부시다 준비 미시 메나지리 직내 통계 첨부 아니네 첩식이 내준 그团에 꿀레 먹고 경고야기 메나샤요를 딘데 인자 다가스레 죽돔을 쉬비나 벤지rum신디 아니 벽이 믹스해겠다 전 첨부 라마지리 디토라 겨울음신다 믹스해 줘 당아주 루규탄에 제비는 직선 롱압자 두개씩이다 저위에 다 루규지需求그래 아니 학바도 딱 메시지 꿀레 준비 찬행 또 결합을 규다 다시 철수도안의 쉬비는 아니 벤지름신디 벽이 있다 투명만 배 계제버질 간중 건지 쉬브스 제 쉬야디 그 다등의 인지날마 롭슈기 The few words I just said in Tibetan are a summary of what I have prepared today. I've been asked to say a few words in English on this gathering in New York for the late Panchen Rinpoche, who was born and who passed away some 30 years ago. His Holiness Panchen Rinpoche was born at a time of impending crisis for Tibet, and it ended at another critical time in our history. During this period, he had a very important and difficult role to fulfill. I have been asked to say a few words on this occasion because I had the privilege of meeting him in Beijing in 1980 as head of the second Tibetan delegation from exile to visit Tibet. Koge Tungji Suba Losan Jimbala, who is here today, was also a member of that delegation. I'm honored to speak at this commemoration, but I must admit that I do not have the close knowledge of Panchen Rinpoche's life, as does Ajahn Rinpoche, who is here with us, and whose presence lends much meaning because of his intimate relationship with the late Panchen Rinpoche. I first saw Panchen Rinpoche in 1956 during the Buddha Jayanti year, when thousands of Tibetans came to India on pilgrimage that winter. And the next time I would see him in person would be in Beijing 22 years later. When we met him that morning in the Chinese capital, it had been only a year since his imprisonment of 1968 had concluded, and he was still under some form of house arrest. Panchen Rinpoche was dressed in a Tibetan layman's chuba, and he welcomed us very warmly. We presented our scarves and letter from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which he immediately raised and let it touch his forehead before placing it on a desk nearby. And he inquired about Tamje Khenpa. Panchen Rinpoche was a big man, and he also appeared robust in spirit. He told us to carefully observe the conditions in Tibet and that we should be forthright in conveying all our findings to the Chinese without fear or favor. And I remember how, every now and then, he spoke with a whiff of distinct Tsang accent, revealing his ties to Tashilumpo Monastery in Shigatse. As you all know, when the Panchen Rinpoche was born, it was under complicated circumstances. His predecessor, having been in exile in Amdo, far away from Tashilumpo Monastery because of a disagreement with the Tibetan government. And while he was still a child, yet to be formally confirmed as the Panchen incarnation, his future was already compromised by the Chinese, first by the Kuomintang, and when they lost the Chinese Civil War, by the Chinese communists. The communists not only took over the patronage of the young Panchen Rinpoche, but manipulated him to call on them to liberate Tibet, a prelude to their plans to invade and incorporate Tibet into the new Chinese state. Soon thereafter, they began to promote him as a political alternative to the Dalai Lama, inviting him to Beijing when the Dalai Lama visited in 1954 to meet with Chinese leaders and to attend important events together. They were able to do the same thing in India during the Buddha Jayanti year. And when the Dalai Lama left Tibet in 1959, they immediately promoted Panchen Rinpoche into the position the Dalai Lama had held. Large sections of the Tibetan public were worried about the Panchen Rinpoche's ties to the Chinese, not sure how he would turn out as a Tibetan leader in the absence of the Dalai Lama. The first test came a few months after the Dalai Lama's escape to India in March 1959. Panchen Rinpoche gave a teaching in Lhasa, and on the first day, the public attendance was very low. In the course of his teachings, Panchen Rinpoche told the gathered that since Tamje Khenpa was no longer with them, he would do his best to carry out the work for the people of Tibet, even if he was not qualified to do so. The public immediately got wind of his reference to Tamje Khenpa, and they turned out in large numbers the next day. Thus began a new chapter in the relationship between Panchen Rinpoche and the people of Tibet. Panchen Rinpoche, in turn, returned the trust the Tibetan people placed in him. In 1961, when he toured many parts of Tibet, he also visited areas in Kham and Amdo, which were now outside the confines of the new Tibet Autonomous Region. He began to speak out strongly of the many mistakes Chinese officials were making, and he conveyed his concerns to key Chinese officials. However, without any real attention or changes forthcoming from them, he decided to take it to the top leadership in Beijing. Against the best advice from Tibetan leaders, and even some Chinese, he wrote a report of his findings in what is known as the 70,000 character petition, which he presented to Chou En-lai in 1962. In it, he described the serious failings of the Chinese policies which had caused tremendous hardship and suffering for the Tibetan people. Detailed instances of famine in parts of Tibet, unheard of before 1959. Excessive imprisonment, punishment, and death of Tibetans after the 1959 uprising. The destruction of over 99% of monasteries and the persecution of Buddhist monks and practitioners. Chou En-lai promised to look into the matter, but instead of finding relief from the Chinese leadership, Panchen Rinpoche soon found himself the target of political criticism, first in TAR circles, which then progressed to more serious charges and attacks when he was summoned to Beijing. And for his wrong views, he was imprisoned in 1968. The 70,000 character petition, which became publicly known and available only in 1996, is an important historical document of failed Chinese policies and the suffering of the Tibetan people under Chinese rule. It did not just cover what happened in the Tibet Autonomous Region, in which the Panchen Lama had a formidable role, but other Tibetan areas of Kham and Amdo under the Chinese provinces of Qinghai, Gansu, Sichuan, and Yunnan. It also served as a critical confirmation of testaments already given by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan government in exile to the International Commission of Jurists for their findings on Tibet, which were detailed in 2 reports in the mid-1960s. We also learned much later, after Mao's death and the fall of the Gang of Four, that this report by Panchen Rinpoche was the basis for General Secretary Ho Yabang's introduction of major policy changes and liberalization in Tibet, which began in 1980 and continued for a few years. After his reinstatement as vice chairman of the National People's Congress in 1980, Panchen Rinpoche was allowed to visit Tibet in 1982. Once more, without fear or hesitation, he began to speak forthrightly, admonishing Chinese officials and challenging the few Tibetans in the highest levels in the TAR government to do much better. He also shared with the Tibetan people his valued relationship and special bond with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He spoke about it during the Molam Festival in Lhasa in 1985, and he advised the public not to believe in rumors to the contrary. Unfortunately, as we all know, in the midst of his vigorous new role in Tibetan affairs, he passed away prematurely at the age of 51 while on a visit to Teshulumpo Monastery. While the relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama was primarily spiritual. Of some 500 years or more, the politics of Tibet under Chinese rule was a major factor in the late Panchen Rinpoche's life. It is for these historical and political reasons that we must remember him as more than just an eminent religious figure with a special relationship with the Dalai Lama, but as a great Tibetan patriot. What the Panchen Lama was able to document, to speak about aloud, and to fight for, that is the great suffering of the Tibetan people under Chinese rule and the inestimable damage done to us, culture, society, and identity, still remains a challenge to all of us who are concerned about the future of the Tibetan people. We must remember, and we must see to it that Gendu Chögyal Nyima is rightfully restored to Tashilumbo Monastery and the nation of Tibet. Tochiche.